This episode of Burning Daylight is brought to you by Stetson Ranches. Do you like beef? Do you like horses? Do you like cowboys? Because Stetson Ranches, they're all about all of that. They're a multi-generational ranch family looking to build something that's going to be profitable and sustainable for their many future generations. They do a lot of different stuff, but they focus on horses and cattle, and they focus on delivering the beef from that cattle right to your front door. Their horses are come from old foundation quarter horse bloodlines, some of the most proven, trusted bloodlines out there, going all the way back to Zanpar Bar to Jack, Peppy Sand Badger, Doc Bar, just to name a few. They're breeding them back to some of the best studs on the market. They got a full crop out of a King Ranch stud coming this spring. It's going to be really awesome. And then they run registered Black Angus cows, covering them with a registered Hereford bull. And aside from just being really good cattle to look at, they're gonna grow, they're gonna convert feed very well, and they're gonna marble to USDA Prime, which is gonna be delivered to your doorstep. Bunch of different packages. You can get a whole beef if you want to. If you don't have the freezer space, they offer a quarter or an eighth at $6.95 a pound, or you can go with the monthly subscription package, which is 8 to 10 pounds of beef. In this bundle, you'll have a hamburger, you'll have roast, you'll have stew meat, and you'll have various cuts of steak depending on the month and what is available. And that'll cost you $100 a month. And if you use the promo code MOVEYOURASS, MOVEYERASS, you'll get 20% off your first order. And let them know you heard about all this on Burning Daylight. They're really great people. I really like working with them. Go give them a follow on Facebook and Instagram, Stetson Beef. You got any other questions about the horses, go to stetsonranches.com. If you'd like to order beef, go to stetsonbeef.com. Next up, we got Thunderbird Equine out of Sandia Park, New Mexico. Jessica Pancost, friend of the show. She is offering spots, 60-day minimum on colts, horses, and mules. Not many people out there working with mules anymore, particularly women, but she's a really good hand. She's a second-generation trainer and a third-generation rancher. In the 60 days that you get, your horse or colt will gain rope and experience in heading, heeling, breakaway, and also just general ranch roping. Colts are you can expect a quiet, confident, and respectful colt with all the right tools to move on to any discipline of your choice. The older ones, horses and mules that are brought in for finishing or anything else, they can be expected to develop a harder stop, collected frame, and more precise movement through leg cues. And they will develop the confidence to do anything you like under saddle, whether that be mounted shooting, roping, trail riding, or general cattle work. And at the end of the program, you'll receive 5 free lessons to reacquaint yourself with your new equine partner. If you got any other questions for her you'd like to get a hold, give her a call, 720-205-2996, or message her on Facebook or Instagram, Thunderbird Equine on both of those. So Jessica's a really, really great gal. Seems to be just a hell of a hand with the horse. Go check her out and let her know you heard about it on Burning Daylight. And finally, we got a new sponsor to the show. And thanks, a big shout out. I know our little agreement is up, but Jake Houston from Houston Boot Company there in Virginia City, Nevada. He is just a hell of a good guy, a good friend of mine, and one of the best boot makers out there. Featured on the Cowboy Channel at the Reno Rodeo, by the way. Also featured at the first annual Burning Daylight Bull Session in Elko, Nevada. But beyond that, he's built boots for me, a couple different bull riders, bronc riders, and he'd love to build a pair of boots for you as well. So check him out, Houston Boot Co. at Houston Boot Co. on Instagram, or give him a holler, 775-315-3022. Thanks a bunch, Jake. I sure do appreciate you. And then finally, our last sponsor, new sponsor to the show, Canadips CBD. These are chew pouches made out of hemp There's 10 milligrams of CBD in each one. It's a great tasting, superior alternative to traditional dip, using CBD in a way that is radical, enjoyable, and effective. All flavor, no tobacco, no nicotine pouches. They're spit-free. Come in 5 core flavors: wintergreen, mint, citrus, mango, and American spice. American spice is the closest thing I've tasted from a chew alternative to Copenhagen snuff. Not quite the same. It's got a little more sweetness to it, but it's I'd say it's kind of a nice mix between a straight and a snuff. Pretty good flavor, though. Crafted and manufactured in Humboldt County, California, the heart of the cannabis industry, the land of coastal cowboys and outlaws, led by innovators and craftsmen. Cannabis dip is only available in licensed dispensaries in Cannabis and not part of the Cannabis CBD campaign or product. That's a whole different product, and that is just California. But the CBD stuff, you won't test positive, and it's good for you. So why does it matter? Traditional dip is a hassle. It's addictive and messy, and it's also over 100 years old. But other alternatives, I would say, I don't know why you'd change it if it's keep going for 100 years, but they bring up a good point here. Other alternatives just aren't good enough for guys today. They either still addictive, still messy, or taste terrible. I will agree with that. Most of them are just awful. Cannabis CBD is a new evolution in dip, allowing guys to enjoy great, long-lasting taste without the downsides. They use 100% American-grown hemp combined with a water-dispersible technology, so it absorbs rapidly. And they've developed a way to deliver CBD through the mouth that no one else has, so that you can actually enjoy it. Use coconut fiber and all natural ingredients in our formulation, no synthetics flavoring or other crap. You can go to cannadipscbd.com, www.cannadipscbd.com. They're open 24/7, and they're also in a bunch of different convenience stores. My buddy Tim saw me test this out online, and he went and bought a can. Didn't use my promo code, damn it, Tim. But he bought it at the convenience store just down the road. Once again, these are THC free, so you can't fail a drug test, and you can't get them in Canada yet, but they're working on that. And the CBD in the pouches are released within 20 minutes, and they're spitless, so no need to spit it out. You can just swallow it, and that's all we got. So head over to cannadipscbd.com. Use the promo code MOVEYOURASS20, MOVEYOURASS20, and you'll get 20% off your order. And go check them out and go buy something, so they keep paying me money to advertise their product. It really is pretty good. It's not going to make me quit chewing, but it's like a nice little relaxation deal, and I think I'm going to use it when I'm researching and when I'm doing interviews. So I like it. I'll keep buying it, and I think you should too. So anyway, cannadipscbd.com, MOVEYOURASS20 for the promo code. Let's get into the show.
Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley, and we're burning daylight. Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Happy Wednesday. Hope the week's treating you well. It's hot here. Dog days of summer, but what do you know? It's Independence Day is over, and hope everybody's been doing well. This we went live with this episode here a while back on Facebook and YouTube, and just getting around to put it up as an audio only. But young Katie joins me, and she got me in touch with a fella named John Clark, who was gubernatorial candidate for the state of Vermont. Did not win, as Vermont is a communist hellhole. And we talked a little bit about that. Talked about his background. Very, very interesting guy. Very smart guy, and just a really awesome conversation. I think you guys are going to like it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Young Katie and John Clark.
Burning daylight in the saddle till the job's done right. Burning daylight. Well, life is just a gather, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the south till the job's done right.
How's the weather over in your country?
Hot and muggy for our standards. We're not very tolerant of hot and muggy.
Well, if I believe everything I read about you online, you're not very tolerant of much. But yeah, it's been hot here too, and I'm pretty tolerant of the heat, but I'm very racist against the humidity. I hate it with the passion of 1,000 suns. But we were talking here. Introduce you to everybody. I've got young Katie's back in action, doing producer stuff, and we've got a former gubernatorial candidate for the state of Vermont, a friend of Kate's, and kind of a different character, but got an interesting story, so I can't wait to hear it. How are you, John?
Very well. Thanks for having me, Matt. I appreciate it.
You bet. So we were talking before, and there's been a very interesting and kind of spooky development in the state of Vermont here, within the last day?
Well, in the last day is when I became aware of it. I don't actually know when it was announced, but what you're referring to is the decision by Vermont's capital city to cancel, because of COVID, the annual 4th of July celebration, and then encourage people to celebrate Independence Day by going to the Western hand drumming ceremony or celebration with people from all over the state and even other states being advertised on the same website. And the same time period, which for who knows how long has been when we commemorated Independence Day, in the name of celebrating diversity. So it really is kind of a pretext. It is cancel culture under COVID. And I can explain to you the background as to why this is happening and just how anti-constitutional the Vermont capital city, city council and mayor are, and have been pretty outspoken. Hard for them. They're going to scramble now, by the way. This is what I wanted to share with you, is that they're going to now attack me and say that, of course we would celebrate the Constitution, and that's all I want them to do. I am happy to be their foil right now, so they will assure us that in future they will celebrate it, and that they're not just trying to cancel our tradition and our heritage. But that is what they're trying to do, and I can explain that if that's okay.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So this started and you know, I have a background in law, and actually I am gifted not by intention, but by circumstances, with having had rather extensive education and training and even practice in First Amendment law, which is actually a great opportunity. And I'm also a former tax attorney, and I've been a farmer here in Vermont for many years. So I understand the common sense as well. So when I ran for office last year, the George Floyd incident occurred, and Vermont City, a very, very progressive city, notwithstanding however many regressive tax structures they impose in the name of progressivism. they immediately put Black Lives Matter, painted it in front of the Vermont State House on State Street. And this was instigated by a city councilor from Ireland, a Democrat, was a former head of the Democrat Party, I believe, in Connecticut, because he's a carpetbagger who came here to tell us how racist we are, from Ireland, which is actually, I believe, more white than Vermont. But at any rate, he subsequently, he brought together the Black Lives Matter message and the people that do it, literally state action. And so many people, there was a lot of tension there, and many Vermonters were saying all lives matter, and the signs went up. And every time I saw one, I kind of cringed, because all lives matter will be interpreted, however well-intentioned it's meant, will be interpreted mean something else. So we came up with this idea to put liberty and justice for all next to BLM at the State House. And I was very clear in my application that this was meant to be respectful of and complementary to those ideas, so that we could restore that common ground of the Constitution. I was rejected and called a racist. I reapplied with 25 approximately candidates who for office, some of color, and we were rejected again under this pretense. So this, in the course of this, the city said that it had the right to decide what message would be there, no one else. This wasn't free speech, this is government speech. Called me a racist, and the mayor, Ann Watson, stated on the record that the United States Constitution didn't go far enough, and that it didn't do enough to take care of people. And therefore, it was this tarnished document. And Connor Casey from Ireland said, well, it sounds like a nice aspiration, but it hasn't got us there. This is critical race theory. This is this new ideology. They all believe in it. They've all put it on the record for all Vermonters to see. And they want to replace the U.S. Constitution with something else, and they don't tell us what it is. But we can see just how pernicious and evil it is. And because critical race theory does not believe in you and I having free speech, because that's a tool of white oppression. It doesn't believe in the 14th Amendment, because you have to allocate wealth based on race in order to compensate for historic grievances that go back forever. So now what they've done is, rather secretively and discreetly, they want to cancel 4th of July. I can tell you, let's go on the record, all right, that I am sure that Ann Watts and the others are clapping themselves on the back and snickering behind their hands that they canceled that white supremacist flag. Yep. This is not celebrating diversity, because if you're going to celebrate diversity, I will delight in the African drumming. I have a djembe. I play congas. I like Cuban rhythms, the tumbao in particular. So I love it. I'm not against it. They're almost like setting us up to then be racist because we don't want this to happen. This is cancel culture. And it's using COVID as a pretext to cancel culture. And it's transparent for everybody. So I hope when they deny me and then condemn me, that they affirm the Constitution and their commitment to its values, because that's going to put them through a little conflict with their cult, because it really is a cult. Anyway, thank you. That's a summary of where we stand right now. I don't believe any other capital city in America canceled 4th of July in the year when we most needed it coming out of COVID, under the pretense of COVID. It's a perfect example of government abusing its power and fear-mongering in order to implement this new ideology. It is happening everywhere.
Yeah, it's it's been pretty amazing. And then all these major corporations, particularly in the tech industry, are in lockstep with this ideology. And I'm a free markets guy, and I the less government intervention into everything is better. But when you have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Google, all these platforms just shutting down any dissenting speech that goes against the established narrative, and that just so happens to be in lockstep with the Democratic Party. It's hard to call them a private company anymore.
Well, I think, Matt, you're raising an interesting point, and we're seeing things that we never thought we'd see. So, for instance, in the past, corporations would move quickly for profit. And I think even the idea of fair trade and Nike and the other things, maybe they were opportunists. Many people here are racist opportunists. They are literally happy to make a couple $1 million with racial agitation. But a lot of these companies like Google and Facebook, they're not really necessarily about profits. They don't really care if they lose viewers in large numbers, because they've become ideologues. Literally, these are companies putting their ideology above even the profit line in the name of social justice. And they're wedded with government so much that this is called fascism. And so then they do stuff that government can't, like silent speech. Everybody says, oh, well, everybody knows that they can do whatever they want. Well, you can't serve a hamburger in a racist way under the Civil Rights Act. And a lot of stuff being implemented as law in Vermont right now is already violating the Civil Rights Act, the Bakke decision, the 14th Amendment. But I thought on the way over today, I can make a parallel to try to explain so that we can understand a little bit better from a free market or not perspective of how this isn't free market. It's more like a cult, because something I've struggled with for a while is how can this ideology, when economics was always completely irreconcilable with socialism and the idea of state control of the government, of business, how could they be reconciled? And the philosopher and member of European Parliament, Ryszard Legutko, who came to Vermont last year and was not allowed to speak because his book, The Demon in Democracy, explained that the far left won't let you speak. So they proved him right. And in that book, he explained it finally. He said the economists were always jealous of the socialists because they get to promise everything. This is not economics. The printing of tens of trillions of dollars is meaning that they too, like the corporations, have abandoned economics. And so I think in order to understand even what's going on right now at our State House, it's not that people are consciously trying to do something, but you can see the signs of a cult. And let me show you with Vermont, by the way, which is runaway spending under COVID. They won't fund the pension, but they're putting money out. They got to help the poor people, and they're making us poorer all the time because you know how government will spend a 10 of your dollars to get 50 cents for itself. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And it's totally out of touch with reality, and it's cult-like. And I thought about how to make an economic analysis or comparison. Now, first of all, this ideology from an economic perspective is promising infinite utopic wealth and solution to all. Now, we know that simply giving them material wealth will not help America's poor suddenly restore their broken families and their broken lives and their drug addiction and their mental illness and other things that many have been caused by or occasioned by these well-intentioned but rather counterintuitive liberal policies. So we're going to throw money at it. Now, if you question that, then, well, you've gone against the religion. So let me give you an example. So we have a Ponzi scheme, right? Now, in a Ponzi scheme, we know what that is for your listeners, perhaps, when you borrow more and more money, named after the famous Ponzi case, but it's happened in a lot of large corporations.
Bernie Madoff.
Giving through fraud the illusion that you have income when really you're just borrowing more and more and more people. Now, though I would make a better comparison, or we might also talk about a perpetual motion machine. Through history, we're going to create in science something that's going to give us infinite energy, or maybe we're going to convert lead to gold. Right now, all of these are utopic dreams that science does not permit. You cannot leverage yourself up in a Ponzi. Now, let's compare those three ideas with something called Amway. And for your listeners or viewers who might be younger, Amway was an organization that allowed people to be individual entrants, and you could sell stuff all at a higher price than it would cost you anywhere else. And the rationale why you should do that is because then you're going to sell it to everybody else and you get a chunk of the profits. And so it worked as long as you could get somebody else to always pay twice as much than what they bought in the store. As you guys might be familiar with Amway. Now, the difference between Amway and a Ponzi scheme, there are a couple. First of all, Amway is not actually a true Ponzi because it's also, you are selling goods for twice their value. You are actually making income, even though it's maybe fraudulent or inflated and not very sustainable. You are bringing something in, but also this is maybe like a Ponzi scheme in the sense that if you questioned Amway, then you were immediately going to you were questioning Jim Jones. You were questioning well, wait a minute, economically, how do I sell this bar of soap for $4 when I could buy it for $1? Oh, it's okay because if you sell 10 bars of soap, you're going to make more money. But I'm scared. Oh no, you got to do it. You got to come to our meeting and you got to go to your mom and your dad and everybody and sell them a $4 bar of $1 soap. And this theological economy that we're seeing both at the federal level of trillions of dollars being printed and on the state level says, what do you mean you're questioning the printing of money? We're going to feed poor people. How dare you ask about the man behind the curtain and ask how we're going to pay it back? We just gave you $2,000. The fact that it actually incurred a debt of $5,000 and it went to corporate interest and all kinds of bank accounts. Well, don't ask that. We're helping you. We just gave you a check. All of the common sense of the past has gone out the window because it's a cult. And if you take that and transfer it to all the other aspects of the cult, You can't question it about race. You can't say you support Martin Luther King. You can't seek color blindness. You can't say anything that questions the race-only narrative, and it's falling apart big time, or as we say in Vermont, it's falling apart wicked good. Because it is not.
Can you talk a little bit, John, about someone
who?
Not
possible. Sorry, thank you.
Someone who did just raise a little bit of concern. You can see that cult-like aggressive attack on someone. Could you talk a little bit about the lifeguard in Vermont? I think he was maybe a high school senior or something like that, but a young kid who used his voice and First Amendment right to respectfully disagree. Can you talk a little bit about that situation?
Sure, and I will refer people to the poetry that I have recited as part of this by a fellow named Rajni Edens, who moved to Vermont, a black poet, who tells us with some of his poetry written when he was 13 in another state about how horrible we are and lynchings, and every police shooting is a lynching. And it just, you would have thought this guy had it worse than Kunta Kinte, all right? And he's in Vermont, which is 97% white, telling us how white people should be hacked apart with machetes because it's only fair. This is in his book of poetry. That book of poetry was introduced as part of a critical race theory curriculum in Essex, Vermont. And a high school student named Alex Katznelson appeared at a public forum where people and parents were expressing their concerns. And he said a few things which were really quite innocuous. I see you've got the picture up. You can see the quotes there. This is free speech. This is by the way, Matt, you probably understand this. This is our highest form of free speech, arguably even above religious, but certainly right there. Political speech in the context of a political forum about a school curriculum. And he was fired as a lifeguard for the separate entity, because this was in the school board. He worked for the Department of Recreation, and they fired him. And they said at one point in the school board, he called them "you people." And they said, well, you people, that's vague and that could be threatening. And we're afraid of having you around people at the pool. He's probably one of the best lifeguards too, by the way, physically. This isn't about merit. It's solely about his political opinion. And he has been punished and he was put on administrative leave. And there was a hearing Wednesday night and we don't know the outcome yet because we've made a big kerfuffle about it because it's already whack-a-mole. They stuck their head out. They did something absolutely unthinkable in America. Because by golly, you will agree with us or you will be silenced. And that is the new utopia being shown to us in Vermont. And I hope Americans will look at it because that's what it is, period.
And then there was another incident at the University of Vermont, which is a fairly good sized college here up in Burlington, which is, as far as New England standards go, a decent sized small city. And can you talk a little bit about what was that professor's name?
Professor Aaron Kinsvater, as I think you know,
yes.
Or maybe you don't. I believe you remember. By the way, Matt, ask Kate sometime to tell your viewers how she was the gubernatorial candidate in Vermont. First, we did a bait and switch. She led me out, and then she's like, I don't know. These people are really crazy. And I was like, all right, shucks, I'll do it. So we've kind of been a team for a while.
Well, all women are kind of known to be shysters, so that's pretty typical.
That's one of those jokes. So Kate's awesome, as you know. So actually, Aaron Kinsvater is another outrageous case, and these are gifts.
Your audio.
Oh, sorry. Is my audio okay? Did you say?
Okay, there we go.
I hear it. Do you hear it, Matt?
Is my audio okay?
It might be. I hear it. Okay. Let me see if Matt can.
I will continue unless you tell me there's a problem.
Go ahead. I can hear you now.
All right.
Yeah,
thank
I
you.
can hear
So Professor Kinsvater is actually a really brilliant and compassionate person. And what's interesting about him is he's a Democrat traditionally, or at least has defined himself that way. I think he can speak for himself. And he's at UVM, where he's a tenured professor. And he's become, over time, increasingly concerned about the administration's rush to implement all these racial awareness policies. And as Thomas Sowell and others explain, this reduces everything to the sole issue of race, the sole determinant issue. And this is a man with an extensive background in psychology and training and really cares about his students and people. And he sees that this is wrong. So he says so in a very compassionate video on YouTube. I believe it's called The Secular Religion at UVM. There it is. And look at the views now. Well, there are more views. So this is a later video when he responded to the provost and dean, who then said, there's no room for him here. A group on campus So giving you the whole story to show you just how ridiculous it is. And if you watch his videos, please do. He brings that aspect of psychological insight to show just how compassionate he is, how we're not racist, and how it isn't about left versus right. He and I have actually become casual acquaintances, and he's a wonderful fellow, and we share an interest in Vermont bird watching. So I guess we're nerds, but I love the wildlife here.
Yeah.
And so the Sisters of Color on campus tried to have him fired, and you should see, they just sound so victimized. They're afraid because one of his followers said that if anybody tries to force this down my throat, I'm going to punch him in the face or something like that. So Aaron put a thumbs up to it. So now that means that he's a threat. You'll see this all the time, this what we call snowflaking, I guess. I've never used that term, but this hypersensitivity and then the hysteria. Oh my gosh, they said you people. And so I say you people now to them. So Aaron Kinsvater was targeted, and allegations that he made the black girls on campus feel physically threatened. It is a perfect example of the histrionic baloney that we're just going to see a lot of this, and then until it peters out, because we all just go, oh, okay, are you done crying now?
And that video that he originally did is something that everyone should watch.
It's
because
great.
He, and to no fault of his own, he is not what would strike me as like an alpha male. I mean, he's very gentle and sweet, and I bet he would just give you, huge hugs if you needed it. I mean, in that UVM sort of counseling department, I'm sure he's a super kind, flexible professor. And what he said, if you had said that 5 years ago, it would have been like, yeah, everyone thinks like that. And to think that his gentle comments were taken as a hate speech is phenomenal. But yeah, so shifting gears a little bit, besides doing politics, you're also a farmer. And I wouldn't say we had a failed political party. I think it was a great idea, but you founded a sort of remedy to the establishment rhino GOP in Vermont. So in Vermont, like many states, unfortunately, we have an incredibly liberal Republican governor. I mean, probably more liberal than a conservative in Missouri or something like that. I mean, he is incredibly free with being a tyrant. And in order to sort of circumvent the establishment GOP, you started something.
So setting that one up for a spike, right? And actually inviting me to talk about how our Republican governor out progressives the woke people sometimes. He's just woke.
He is woke.
It's
well, that's
really
important.
becoming, again, kind of a charade. Everything's upside down. What is good is called evil. So Kate is referring to the ag-Republicans. Let me tell you the story. I'll try to be quick because this is where she kind of came in. As I got involved a couple of years ago to try to contribute to our state, seeing many of the problems, particularly the fiscal problems of a government bureaucracy that's growing faster than our incomes can support, while expanding programs for the poor people that continue to increase at a rate, kind of like I describe it as a dragon eating its tail. All right. It literally is a tumor. I should have brought my tick belly shirt. I have I have these shirts we sell with it shows a tick sucking the blood out of our state capital, and we need to get rid of this. And so the background I came from very much. So I was an attorney. I was an international corporate tax attorney with what is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. And then I actually practiced for a number of years in Connecticut as a criminal defense attorney and a litigator. So I have a lot of background in a lot of different dimensions that have come into play. But early on, I also have a political science degree. And I was like, we need to identify 3 issues, and we need to bring together people on those 3 issues, including people in the middle. And we need to have a message that is a conservative message, not a rhino message, that actually will appeal to people. And if we could win their trust over on that, and then show we'd pay the pensions and show we would try to support businesses and find that balance, then we will get more of a license to represent people. And so we put this together. We were talking about bringing different groups together. Like, now all I need is somebody to carry the message. And I found this farmer woman named Kate Bowen in Putney, Vermont, and she agreed to run. And plus she blunted the gender card. It wasn't because we want to play the gender card. We just want to blunt it so that we can actually talk about issues. Everybody wants to talk about identity, what color you are, what gender you are, what sexuality you are. Well, how about can you do the job? Oh, but are you for or against Donald Trump? Well, what difference does it make? I can do the job.
Yeah.
When we did that, we ended up with 38 candidates running with us. Several of them made it in, and we broke the supermajority in Vermont. The Rhino governor stood up against a law, 2 laws passed to allow illegal entrants to the United States to vote in our elections in Vermont. But like a true progressive, he rejected it because he wants it to be statewide. He didn't reject it because it's against the Constitution and the very idea of the sovereignty of a nation. And so that's going to probably go to court. Wendell Berry is a big teacher for me. And you may know Wendell Berry. He's been teaching for a lot of years about conservation and being more humble and living within our means and being more aware of how we're impacting the ecosystem. His father, actually, a tobacco farmer, was also a lawyer. And so for a long time, I thought, well, because I was a lawyer and then I became a farmer because I got sick with Lyme disease. And I even now struggle with something called fibromyalgia syndrome. And I'm trying to manage it all the time. And farming is good for me because I need to be working and moving all the time. It's part of my condition. I'm in pain, but the more I move, the better. And by the way, I used to be out west when I was reading your bio, Matt. I spent a summer in Yellowstone and I just love it out there. But anyway, that's a little digression. What we did is we had to create a platform. We're in a very strange place. Our Republican Party is a schizophrenic party in Vermont, as it is in some parts, because we have a Rhino governor. So the split is we have a governor within our party who doesn't attend events, who doesn't share our value systems, and has basically sold out to the left and is writing carte blanche checks on everything from abortion to gun rights to the money spending and the race card and calling us white supremacists. That actually causes a lot of people to not be drawn very much to the Republican Party. Yeah. Meanwhile, we had an element here in ultra-liberal Vermont that were maybe considered more far-right conservatives like Trump supporters. And so to try to find a middle road in that election between Donald Trump and Phil Scott, the ultra-liberal, who you may know is constantly butting heads with Phil Scott to puff himself up. He's fought with him over everything from Charlottesville to immigration because Phil Scott, he does what his liberal base wants. And so we came up with the idea of the Agri-Republicans platform. And I created something called the 2020 Farming Manifesto. It's on my website still at clar2020.com. Look at that. You guys are good. So this has a 14-page version and a 2-page version and a video. And if you watch it, it's populism at its best. It says, hey, you people in the city, you actually are dependent on an industrial food supply system that corporate America owns, and it's not very healthy for you. It's not sustainable, and you're becoming enslaved by it, and it's very vulnerable for you to do so. Maybe COVID, since this video has shown us this vulnerability. Hey, how about you support local farms? The purpose of this and how it was designed is Wendell Berry has shown that over the last 100 years, as farms have been usurped and destroyed, small family farms, by large corporate interest in industrial food production, in addition to all those other problems, it has destroyed community. And it has been economics that has destroyed it. Yes, the universities and the departments of agriculture said, yeah, get big or get out. Hey, if you can't be viable, you're not relevant, you're archaic. And we've destroyed not just the food supply, but the communities. Because when the farms go, then you lose the equipment dealer and you lose all of the feed dealer and you lose the carpenter and the mill that cut timber for them. And you lose all, especially in a place like Vermont, which was 29,000 dairy farms in 1929 and has now just dropped down to about 600. Yes, they're bigger, they're consolidated, they're efficient, and community has been similarly consolidated, destroyed, and made inefficient, and people are poor. So there are other problems in the world, but as to farming, Wendell Berry says, for some reason we say we love family farms and we just keep losing them. Well, the reason is that we keep taxing land at the highest developmental value. And that becomes impossible unless you're very large scale or in the perfect place, especially in a place like this when rates are going up. Vermont is skyrocketing. It's becoming the new Martha's Vineyard. It becomes impossible to be economically viable as a farmer on a small scale there. So what I did in the manifesto is show how we could use tax credits, not to subsidize, but literally to remove that unfair burden to those local businesses. And then look how much it would help all of the other businesses. It literally is an idea to boost the economy, boost local food production. It's a win-win for everybody. And we got attacked, by the way, didn't we, Kate? We got attacked. Oh, it's a new party. And so we're learning, Matt, you may see this. So we then went back to be a Republican. I went to run as a standard Republican because the people within the party said, well, Clar is creating a third party. I've been trying to be clear all along. No, we are trying to shape a direction and an identity for conservatives in the future in Vermont, where we're the minority and it's a very liberal state. But the same issue is going to confront America. What are we as conservatives post Donald Trump or post Phil Scott? Are we rhinos? Do we have two parties? And so it's going to be an ongoing conversation, and it needs to be about the issues. That's what could bring us all together. When we starve, when our economy collapses, when we have hyperinflation, they don't care. The opioids crisis, heroin doesn't care whether you're black or white. So all of this race stuff and this rush for social justice on every way, it's an absolute fantasy escapism from the reality the rest of us live in. And that reality will come back, and conservatives will be the only ones poised, or libertarians, or moderate Democrats, the ones who understand the core principles of the Constitution and the core principles of economics. Those are the ones that will have the way forward out of this disaster that those who are destroying those things are telling us this is the way to go and taking us off a cliff. Anyway, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Kate, in that ramble, that rant.
So, what do you see long term for the state of Vermont? I've been friends with Kate for a while now, and boy, it looks bleak from out here.
Well, that's a neat question. I do like challenging questions, don't I? Because I like to think.
Yeah.
No man is an island. No state is an island. This country is still one country. We're not going to secede. I mean, if we could, we'd take Chittenden County and send them booting. That's where I am right now. But literally, it's another world from the rest of Vermont. They don't know. It reminds me of Rome. The senators are bickering and fiddling, and they don't know where their food comes from. And one day, all they get is styrofoam packaging. They go, what happened? And their $50,000 electric car, they can't find a mechanic anymore because everybody left. So this is the canary in the coal mine for the rest of the nation. When you put a healthy canary into this indoctrination education, traumatizing children, terrifying them about guns, the environment, a disease that doesn't kill them, it isn't even that deadly to anybody under 80. Is this deliberate? I mean, this is very Orwellian. The only thing to fear is fear itself, whether in your Vermont or Nevada. And if we think that we are somehow separate, you and I, or people even in China, as far as our ecosystem goes, or even now increasingly our economy. Wendell Berry wrote an essay some years ago that the greatest weapon of mass destruction ever created by humanity was globalization. Think about that. What does he mean? I think we can read it. Dissolver of jobs and businesses, equalizer and leveler of cultures, international codependence, an ability for corporate entities and wealthy people to dominate and enslave more people than ever before in human history has shown us that exposure. Vermont is the place where we fight from behind enemy lines to tell everybody else in the nation why you don't want to do this. Let it fail in Vermont. Maybe that's what has to happen. But we may have to have another Great Depression before people learn the humility and the gratitude that came from that age. And you know what? A lot of Vermonters are still here. And here's the plus side. We're one of the few places in the country where we still do have our native culture, where I do live on land that was my great-great-great-great-grandfather's, and many people do. And we have that sort of collective knowledge and sense of community that really is so evidently dissolved in so many parts of the country. So Vermont still has a lot to say and a lot to offer if we weren't told how backwards and redneck and Inuit-like blubber-eating stupid people we are, white racists with no teeth. It's not who we are. And America's going to find that out, because you cannot subjugate a people like this in their culture and malign and slander them for so long and think it's going to work, because it's just not true. And that's what Aaron Kinsvater, the professor, was saying. After a time, this is what Douglas Murray writes in The Madness of Crowds. You can only compel people to speak a lie for so long until they have an inner crisis, all right, an existential crisis. You can only call a man a woman for so long. You can only say that a 12-year-old is really a squirrel for so long. You can only just go so far with this until at one point, and then the whole thing breaks down. And his worry and ours is that the backlash could be worse. That people in their anger and frustration at being called racists and calling somebody an N-word is horrible. Guess what? It's really horrible to call somebody a racist who's really trying not to be, or has a long record like I do of helping people of color. It's just horribly offensive, and that's why I've stood up against it. But anyway, so Vermont still has a lot to do, but we're still America. We're still in this game together. There's no jumping off the boat. I hope that answers your question, Matt. Thank you.
Well, it's good to see optimism in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. But I think you're right. I think people are slowly but surely kind of waking up this, that we're on a very steep downhill slide into totalitarianism. I mean, that this COVID thing, it didn't wake up as many people as I had hoped it would, but it woke up a lot. And you see, places like Texas, Nevada, Florida just getting swamped with people. And I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because now, I mean, I grew up in Colorado. I'm in Nevada, and so I'm watching two of two states that I've lived in and loved. I lived in Kansas, but I didn't particularly love Kansas. But two of the states that I've lived in that I truly love are just on a downward spiral. Colorado's pretty well lost to these uber progressives, and boy, I hate to say it, but Nevada's not far behind, and it's a shame because it's all coming from Las Vegas and Reno. The rest of the entire giant state of Nevada is super conservative, but more along the lines of "don't fuck with me" conservative, like just leave me the hell alone.
Well, it's kind of Vermont's traditional individualism as well. And, we suffer from that, because then we kind of withdraw from that political sphere, and we cede the ground to be run by others. It's interesting what you say, Matt. I'm thinking about as you say it, because you've also pointed out to this rural-urban divide. And if we look through history, it's actually happened before. And it's no surprise it happens again. I mean, I mentioned the Romans, and Wendell Berry talks about it. The center, the urban areas, always take the periphery, those who produce their food, for granted. And the real power structure should be the other way around, because as I said in my video there at the Farming Manifesto, it's the people in Chittenden that depend on us. We're the ones that raise the food. If the power goes out and your solar panels don't work, I got a wood stove. I mean, I've been my whole life developing as a backpacker and everything else. Now, this isn't about prepperism, because people try to be negative or diminish that, and that's because it makes them uncomfortable. They go, "Oh, you're a prepper, you're paranoid." No, I'm just prepared. It's like having you have a spare tire in your car. You're paranoid. No, actually, I just have a brain, and I carry a coat in the winter because I live in a place where it can be 40 below zero before wind chill. So to be prepared and to be self-reliant are core Vermont principles, and they should be American principles. And a lot of American, and particularly urban areas, have abandoned that into an uber dependency. And that takes techno-mysticism. It takes a dependence on a trust in technology and or government to always be there for you. And that's a dangerous thing. And throughout our history, there have been a lot of people who have always resisted that. And I happen to be one of them. And there are many of us. And we just want to have the freedom to be left alone, right? And we exist all over the country. Sadly, we're going to be proven right. And recently I heard a video about a guy who said that, let me see if I get this right. Hard times make good or strong men. Have you heard this one? And strong men make good times. Good times make weak men, and weak men make hard times.
Yep.
And we're in stage 4. This generation, even our elderly people right now, they are not the people of the Great Depression. They're not the people in Vermont that I grew up around. Hardworking people who had suffered, struggled, and appreciated everything they had and never complained about anything. By the way, these were white farmers in Vermont. Vermont is very white because we didn't drag black people here. We banned slavery in 1777. We had the highest rates of voting for Obama in both elections in the entire country other than Hawaii, wink, wink. But we're told we're racist. We have the narrowest gap in incomes between black and white people in the country up until about 3 or 4 years ago. And now we're told that it's dropped by $10,000 per on average median income. And this proves how white supremacist we are. No, it proves that you brought some Somali refugees here and totally messed with the statistics like you did with the police reports to allege that all of our police are racist because they started arresting out-of-state fentanyl and heroin dealers who are coming here from New York City and Hartford, Connecticut, where I used to practice law and defend them. You want to legalize the drugs, go ahead, but don't tell our police that they're racist by virtue of the demographic that you've manipulated so that you can a priori prove your ideology. This is a cult. This is a religion. It doesn't bear any relation to facts. That's why I'm confident 2 + 2 will always be 4.
That's a good point you brought up.
I don't have any other math to use, and they are trying to create new math, and it doesn't work. It never will.
I always like to point out that it's not necessarily the cops that are bad. It is the stupid laws that lead to bad cops, and it's those stupid laws that lead to the inner city gang violence, because that coupled with the welfare state that has just robbed the Black community of trillions of dollars of wealth over generations, and it's all government created. And
I agree. Yeah. And actually, so this may be of interest to you and your listeners, but I mean, I was practicing law in Connecticut. I studied as a tax attorney because my first wife was British and we moved to the UK. That's where we planned to stay. Long story, when I came back, I hung out a shingle, and that's what came in the door. I didn't even study criminal law in law school, and now I'm in there. And then I became a public defender. So it actually became a big part of my practice. And this was the crack epidemic. And almost all my clients are Black and Hispanic. And I don't have the luxury as a lawyer to be racist when I'm doing this. And if the impact of the law is either intentionally or unintentionally disproportionately impacting people of poverty or race, because there were inner city white people doing crack and killing each other too. But to the extent it is, I'm just not in a position as a lawyer to stop that any more than a nurse or a doctor is responsible for, a virus being released in a lab in Wuhan. So I could say I agree with the policy of decriminalizing drugs, especially now that you're giving people free Suboxone, and even if they don't need it, it looks increasingly obvious that the drug war failed, no matter how much you intended, and alcohol is worse. All right. But you hit on something, because the urban problem isn't just that. It's also, historic disparities. It's also a rush of jobs out of Detroit. Was that Republicans did that? Or was that outsourcing, that globalization of corporate property? It's just a natural, human, nobody's at fault. It's just a reality of the modern abilities of technology and our growth in trade. And then when you add technology, and all of the jobs that have been removed actually have taken away more jobs than globalization. So if you start combining all of those things, you have what we call, the urban problem. And it really is an urban problem for Black and white people, depending where you go. It really isn't about race. It is an Appalachian problem that white people starved in Appalachia. It has been a horrible poverty in Vermont. And we're now told, by the way, Vermont used sharecropping laws and Jim Crow laws to push Black people off the farmland here. This is H-273, and they want to set $10 million up to give to Black people to have farmland to compensate for that. But that didn't happen. There were never more than about 500 Black people in this state for about 100 years, and it was poor because the price of milk dropped by 50% after the Great Depression, and thousands of farms folded here in Vermont. People were walking around starving, and there were no social programs, there were no shoes, and there were no teeth. And people didn't complain about it. They just survived because they were always sustaining themselves. That's what they lived with. And what were they going to do? But to rewrite that history is a horrible crime, and our governor's doing it. Now, more broadly, isn't that what's being done to white people around this country? Painting everybody with one brush? Weren't many parts of this country settled by people who wanted to raise families? But anyway, so I didn't get away from the urban problem. A lot of this, look at Harlem and how it rebounded. Because of capitalism, because of growth, because of a renaissance, because of merit, because of economic activity, because people were just allowed to fix it themselves. I mean, if you look at the story of Forest Park and Mario Cuomo and how they're having housing projects, they don't work. Affordable housing is an oxymoron in Vermont. It's something like $300 a square foot. But you know what? Our bloated bureaucracy gets a lot of federal dollars under Section 8 to help those poor people, while it takes its chunk. It wanted to pass a sales tax this year. It's proposing to on groceries, so they can rake 15% off the top and then redistribute it to the poor people. But like all these utopian plans, it is demonstrably provable that it cannot do so, that it's never been done so, that it's hugely inefficient, and that it creates more inequalities, more waste, and more poverty. Yeah, they'll do it anyway, Matt.
What's really awesome about the state of Nevada? All food items are tax exempt. So that helps out the poor community shitload.
Well, in Vermont it is too. And in most states, again, I'm a tax guy. So this is about regressive versus progressive. It is viewed as one of the most regressive taxes to tax food. And here we have the Vermont ultra progressives putting forth how it is they're going to tax food to help the poor people. Anybody with half a brain cell should look closely at what that's all about. Yeah. That is, if we get more rescues like that, we're going to all be dead.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's, that was, I forget who I heard it from, but one of the best ideas I heard for economic stimulus during the pandemic was to just abolish the federal income tax. do you just and let everybody go back to work? That would have been caused the greatest economic boom we've ever seen.
Well, it would, but it would have cut into tax revenues a little bit. It's a supply side argument. Interestingly, Donald Trump did that for all the horrible condemnation of his tax plan. He doubled the standard deduction, and a lot of what he did gave very real money back into the pockets of the poorest wage earners. So, I mean, when you say abolish the entire income tax, but we're actually in trouble now. I suspect you may understand this, because now that we've been paying people more to stay home than they were making when they were working, there's a little work attitude there, a little moral hazard, but also more importantly, and many of those jobs are gone. So when they do go back to go to work with their grumbling, they're not going to have as much disposable income. And 70% of the U.S. economy, according to economists, is attributable to consumer spending. It's really been about 60 or 70 years of a binge. Even with our so-called recessions, we've artificially rebooted it. We haven't paid back the money wasted in the deregulation of the S&L crisis. We haven't paid back a penny of the money that went to quantitative easing and bailing out the banks in the 07-08 crisis. And now we are off the reservation. There is no quantitative tightening. We've just printed another $10 trillion. So if you everybody go back to work now and they don't have the money because they had to tighten their belts and there aren't as many jobs and they're making less money and they stop buying stuff, guess what? You have a depression. You have declining purchases. You have businesses laying people off. They're not going to have foreign sales. And now you have stagflation because you have inflation because you pump the money in and it's never going to get to the wage earner that you said you did it for. Oh, we raised the wages for the wage earners. It's not how it works. Math does not bow to a false religion. Sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was going to say, you sound a lot like a certain congressman from the state of Texas
Ron Paul?
that got real famous there. Yeah.
All right. So I just paraphrased from some of his writing about the Austrian School of Economics in his book, The Revolution. But when we get into money theory and these kinds of things, we have to be very humble and we have to weigh a lot of things because we really don't know. Because remember, economics is not a science. It's about psychology. And we're seeing it right now. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
I'm a big Ron Paul fan, by the way.
Me too. I've joked, semi-joked over the past year or so of starting the Church of Burning Daylight with Ron Paul as one of my apostles.
Well, and in hindsight, I think Ross Perot was very similar, and I was a little distrustful of Ross Perot, but not Ron Paul. I think he always showed, even if he had a humility, he has a humility, and he has a genuine intellect. And boy, does he rattle the cages of those who want you to believe their new Kool-Aid plan for infinite money supply and infinite income, and everybody's going to go to work because they just love to earn and not just click and watch TV and porn all day long and eat ice cream until they have a big donut. That's the culture we're creating. Yeah. Soft.
Yeah, I agree. And Joe Rogan says that quote a lot, that hard times make strong men, strong men make easy times create hard men, or weak men, and weak men create hard times. And we're definitely in the stage of weak men creating really hard times. And it's also preventable.
It's tragic. Yeah. And, actually, you hit on something, because, and this I believe is really important for us, for our political future and for our hearts and for our nation. There's a hate in this. I mean, the central Judeo-Christian tenet of colorblind justice and equality and forgiveness has been abandoned. This is an ideology, as Thomas Sowell explains, it's very much like eugenics and like Nazism, because it's all about genetics. But there's no forgiveness in it. So there's no end to it. But one thing I'm concerned about, like I mentioned, that in The Madness of Crowds, Douglas Murray mentions it, is that, well, are we going to retaliate? Many Americans are very mad at having their Constitution, their foundation attacked, their integrity and their very nature, their very core identity being told that they're racist at their very core subconsciously. And so there's a real danger that people retaliate. We have to actually be loving. And the way to do that is to actually understand, as farmers or as constitutionalists, that these people, forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do. What they're asking to do, just like the Bolsheviks. I mean, read Dostoevsky's The Possessed. I mean, most of the people in the Bolshevik revolution were not really deliberately doing it, and they got consumed by it. The Kulaks and others. Jordan Peterson talks about this. You can see the signs right now. Why do these people on the white left in Vermont who are crowing, and this one woman, a representative named Marie Cortez, said to the whole legislature during a devotional that's supposed to be reflective, well, I don't care if I get in trouble for it. You're all white supremacists, and you just don't know that yet. You better wake up, and I'm here to tell you about it. I mean, this is insane stuff. So anyway,
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah. It's
You talk more.
one of the cool things I've noticed here, especially of late, just here in the last couple of weeks, even, is the explosion of videos on social media of parents fighting back against this critical race theory, and so there's stuff like that, and you see the view count on it. It's massive view counts, and it just gives me so much hope for humanity, and just the explosion of homeschooling that this pandemic has forced parents into, but there's been a pretty good chunk of people saying like, I think I'll just keep homeschooling, and we're both Ron Paul fans. There happens to be a very good homeschool curriculum that he developed out there, and it's just. The options are endless if people know about them, and that's so I think there's a lot of hope for the future, as hard as it is to see it sometimes.
Well, and let's make a comparison. Vermont again makes a great guinea pig / canary in the coal mine for this. Vermont has the 4th highest cost per student in the country, and we lost about 25% or more of our students over the last 25 years, and we just keep hiring more teachers. I mean, it's literally unsustainable. But many people during COVID found that when they got stuck home with their kids, some of us drove them buggy, but many found, you know what, this is the best thing that could ever happen to me. And that's what we hope for, maybe, is that good comes out of evil. But look, though, again, how government, so now Vermont wants to spend $300,000 to $500,000 or $300 to $500 million per year, starting in a couple of years, in a state of 600,000 people that's already very far in debt with a $6 billion negative pension, if you assume we're going to earn 7.5% a year for the next 30 years. They want to do this because they're going to save the family. So they destroy the family, then they create a state family. Why don't we just pay mothers and fathers, particularly fathers, to stay home? It would be a lot cheaper. But similarly, so Vermont used COVID money to say, well, we're going to give everybody a free lunch. All right, first of all, it's very regressive, because it was without regard to income. So now you're taking tax money from poor people on fixed incomes and using it to subsidize lunches for people who earn $2 million a year and have a $2 million house. But moreover, these lunches are industrial lunches. The studies show these kids are going to be obese. And maybe we have to have parents being encouraged to pack a lunch that is healthy and shows love, instead of telling them, don't worry, we'll do that for you now. Layer upon layer, the more we expand government, the more we compromise the human relationships and the family that really do give us the greatest amount of happiness in the world, in our lives, that we could have. But anyway,
it's truly amazing what this beautiful idea of self-government that was birthed here in this country, and the principles of limited government and balance of power and checks and balances and the peaceful transition of power has devolved into the largest organization that the world has ever seen, the U.S. federal government. I mean, when you look at not just here, the government intrusion here, but like in the Middle East and in South America, and now with these ramping of tensions on the Ukrainian border with Russia, like, do we just have to prove that we have a bigger dick than the other largest holder of nuclear weapons in the world, or can we just like kind of ease back and just like have a standoffish peace? Can we just like leave each other alone?
Well, you're asking me a big philosophical question there, and I guess that we have this human nature thing in problem. We have some kind of new theology that says people are all basically good unless they're white. It's shifted the way we fight too, and it's part of maybe the secularism or materialistic reduction of humans and our miraculousness in this modern world we live in. But if you look at, I think it's I think I want to say John Piper, but I think that's the wrong name. The book is called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He actually wrote a sequel too, and that we found ways to pump the resources out of. Yeah, he lives in New Hampshire. We can steal money out of countries now without ever firing the shot. All we got to do is make them borrow a lot of money at a rate that's a little too high, give them a little 5% in the hands of the politicians that set up the NGOs, and everybody gets milked, and we all make money. Extracting the natural resources of countries all over the world with virtually free labor without ever having to risk any of our own treasure or blood. That's kind of the world we're living in. What you just described was that on a larger scale. How about what do we have now?
Look at young Katie, by the way. She is on the ball.
Oh, is she doing that? I'm impressed. Yeah. She is on the ball. I'll tell you, I have her on your campaign team. She'll try to keep you on the ball too, and you can't keep up.
That's why I hired her as
mention
my
nuclear
producer.
weapons. Can you imagine the United States government secretly taking hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. tax money and sending it to Russia so that they could develop nuclear weapons for us? Because that's what we did in China. It's the Chinese military at the Wuhan laboratory that were very clearly developed this COVID virus that now we're told has a Delta variant. Be scared, everyone. Be very, very scared. Run. You might die. Let the government protect you. It's right out of Orwell again. Use fear. How do you be courageous? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of dying. I don't care what your religion is. Be afraid of being enslaved, right?
Yeah,
Live
exactly.
free or die. Live free or die trying is our motto. So sorry, I'm rambling again. And Kate's awesome. Kate, would you like to speak? What will you share with our viewers today? Talk up.
No, I think what you, to circle back in a Jen Psaki way, what you said before about being accused of being a racist. I think that until people really feel that and that really internalize that level of hatred that neighbors can have for you kind of instantaneously, is just so Nazi-esque and Hitler-y. I was a kid who was really obsessed with learning a lot about the Holocaust and stuff. And one of my questions, like life questions, I think, was trying to understand that kind of hate that, a neighbor in Berlin could have for their next door neighbor at their flat, and how they could, kids could play together and they could, grab a cup of sugar from them one day and then the next day call the authorities and have them taken out of hiding or whatever. And our family experienced that, and it's a depth of violation that I guess I can compare it. Maybe it's like a little bit of being raped, but it's 1,000 times more because your whole world blows up and everything changes overnight. Instantaneously, survival becomes what's important when people are threatening to, injure you, your children. And those you realize what barbarianism is and how it's a little bit like the Revolutionary War when the, Brits thought we were going to fight them marching in neat columns and, wearing feathers in our helmets and stuff like that. And we do a little bit more of the guerrilla warfare. I think where the left has taken us has been a different type of combat that we weren't expecting. And that level of, Victor Davis Hanson talks about it a lot with being civilized. And we take that so for granted. But the idea of shared values and a lot of those mostly Christian, but Christian Judeo values, how that holds society together. And, we can look at globalization and different things, but why does the US or England and the US or whatever, why does that part of the world actually look and function differently than the internal conflict in Africa, where